Hello everyone. Welcome. Now that you're here, I can begin. When nothing is more than something. Call from the deep is the title of this class. And it's based on the fact that we now open up the third book of the Torah, which is called the book of Leviticus, or in Hebrew, the book of Vayikra. So 3 out of 5 books. The third of the 5 books, which is also has another name. This book is called Torah Kohanim, the instruction or the Torah for the priests. And it has a name called Sefer Aveda, the book of service. It's unique in the fact that all of 5 books, this one is the one that has most laws and less narrative. Whereas in the previous books and later books discuss more the journey, which I'll soon explain. So when you open up this book, there's a very odd opening. It starts like this: Vayikra al Moshe. Vayikra al Moshe. It literally means he called to Moshe. It doesn't even say he. Vayikra means called to Moshe. So immediately the glaring omission doesn't say who called. It should have said, like it says so many times in the Torah, Vayikra Hashem, that God called to Moses. Like it says right afterwards, Vayidaber Hashem Elov, and God spoke to him from the sanctuary. So that missing word is a key element here. That's one thing. Another thing, when you look at the letters in Hebrew, the Hebrew letters of the if you ever looked at a Torah scroll doesn't have any vowels. The people who read the Torah scroll every Shabbat and during Torah readings through the week, Monday and Thursday, they actually memorize the words because the words don't have vowels. And they also there's almost like a continuation of all the words of the Torah. There are some breaks here and there, but it's very different than what we read in the printed version. One of the things that distinguishes the letters are what's called in Hebrew, that letters are usually we call average size. But there are some letters in the Hebrew alphabet that are written in the Torah in smaller size. Like in this case, like the Aleph of Vayikra is written with a smaller Aleph. And then there's called a larger size. So you have like a super size, you have a small size, and you have an average size. And there's only a few places in the Torah where you have the differences. Most of the letters are written in the same size. So here again there's a small Aleph, which is yet another unique thing when you open up this chapter. So even though these things may seem technical, as we shall soon discuss, it actually carries within it volumes and layers of meaning that have very powerful personal messages that discuss our own personal lives. As I always explain in this class, is that the Torah is a blueprint for life, and every aspect of the Torah, every episode, every narrative, every character, every detail expresses to us another aspect of the blueprint of our own personal lives. You can almost say that the Torah is like an X-ray of our souls. So including these details that I'm describing here. So let's begin. As I said, this is the third book of the Torah. That's very different than the other 4 books. Let me explain why. When you read the Torah, I'll just give a panorama, an overall overview. The Torah is written mostly in narrative form, which means it begins with, in the beginning God created heaven and earth, and you have the chronology of the creation of the world, the creation of Adam and Eve, and then the generations begin. And the Torah talks about these generations, generation up to Adam and Eve, and their children, and so on. 10 generations later, the first book itself, the first chapter in the Torah actually covers the largest span of time in the entire Torah. The first chapter itself, spans around 2,000 years. Then 10 generations after Adam comes Noah, that's chapter 2. And then as the Torah continues, the focus on time becomes more concentrated. So as I said, the first chapter covers 2,000 years. From Noah to Abraham is another, it shouldn't be 2,000 years, more like 1,800, 1,900 years. From Noah to Abraham is another 100 years, another 10 generations. Let me just make sure I got this right. It's around 1,000 years, the first chapter. a little more because the flood, 1,500 years. The second chapter covers around 1,000 years, and then begins the story of Abraham, which covers his life of 175 years. Then comes Isaac, 180 years, and then comes Jacob, 147 years. So the whole book of Genesis, the first book, covers approximately 2,000 years, something like that. After that, the rest of the Torah, the whole Torah covers only 40 years. So it's a very disproportionate structure. Book 2, Exodus, begins with the exile of the Jews in Egypt, and concludes with the Jews beginning their journey through the wilderness. As we know, the journey through the wilderness is 40 years. So the rest of the Torah will span these 40 years. So technically, the Torah was given in the year 2448. So the exile in Egypt was around 210 years. So you have the first book being a little more than 2,000 years, the first chapter of the second book around 200 years, and then begins 40 years. Now, smack in the middle comes this third book. And this third book actually doesn't really it covers some events, but primarily it's laws that were stated that once they build the temple, so the Jews received the Torah, once they build the temple, God issued a whole series of laws, and that's what the book of Vayikra is all about. It's considered to be the most complex of all the 5 books. As I said, it's filled with laws of priests, the priestly law about the priests, their service, laws about sacrifices and offerings, laws about purity and impurity, kosher, and so on and so forth. This will resume. So basically, the end of last chapter, the Jews have built the temple. All these laws are told, and then in the third chapter in the book of Numbers, in the 4th book, the journey of the Jews continues until they reach Israel. So it's an interesting structure of the chronology of it all, with this book being right in the middle. So you can really say, if you want to know the study of Torah, is actually the whole Torah, but the laws that are most obvious are the ones in this chapter. So what is this? What's the significance of all this, of this technical stuff I was just describing? Life is a journey. It's a journey. The Torah, therefore, most of the Torah is all about this journey. But every journey has its laws, so to speak. Every journey has its rules. If one wants to travel well in life, you have to have guidelines. Think of going on a trip, and you have no map, and you have no directions, and you have no plan. So a journey like that will usually end up either being lost, or just completely confused and going nowhere, going in circles. So the journey of life is no different. So the journey of life, when the Jews are about to begin their journey, God says, okay, now let me give you some instructions. And it begins with this third book, and it says the instruction for life begins knowing, above all, like he begins this chapter, he says, Adam ki yakriv mekem. When a human being, when a person of you will bring yourself as an offering, that's what he says, Adam ki yakriv mekem karban laHashem. So the question that's asked is, why does it say, it should have said, Adam became ki yakriv karban laHashem, when a person among you will bring an offering. Instead it says, Adam ki yakriv mekem, as if you will bring yourself. So the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad Chassidus, explains, because this offering is not just an offering of a sacrifice of an animal, it's an offering of ourselves. Life is about offering yourself for a higher purpose, for a higher cause. And this is the first secret to every journey. Every journey is not about you, it's about reaching somewhere. So the way the Kabbalistic and Hasidic masters put it is, your soul comes down to this world not just to indulge in its own interests. The soul comes down to this earth for a purpose. And that's the most important thing in your life. Why did you fulfill your purpose? Because one day, when soul will go back to its place, the question that's going to be asked is not how much money you made, not how many contacts you made, not how much equity you've collected. It's going to be asked, did you fulfill your mission for which you were sent? This is the first rule of every journey. Did you fulfill your mission? And you'll say, well, in the middle of the journey I got distracted here, I went to this party, I went to that party, I made a lot of money here, I successful this, I failed at this, I succeeded. They'll say, we don't really care. These are sideshows. Did you fulfill your mission in this world? So the most important thing is a mission that we're here to serve. And that's how the chapter begins, Ki yakriv mekem, that a person will bring themselves as an offering. That's the first most important thing, a dedication to a cause. Soldiers in a army are dedicated to the cause of whatever that army is fighting for. All of us have a cause and a calling for which we were created. As the Talmud says, that the entire world was created in order to serve a human being, and the human being says, and I was created in order to serve you. Shamash Eskeni, to serve my literally means my nest, or my God. So the first thing, most important thing that a person has to know is that they're here not to serve themselves, but to serve a higher cause. It's the opening of this chapter. And why is it stated here? Because right now begins the journey. Right here begins the journey. In the last book of Exodus, we already started, the journey also began. The Jews leave Egypt. 49, 50 days later they come to Sinai. And a year later they build the temple. But the real journey in the wilderness, the real journey that will bring them to the promised land, and promised land refers to the promise that all of us want to reach our ultimate, as they say, the place of our desire, the thing we dream and aspire for. To reach there, it takes a journey, and the journey requires, as I said, a map and a guide. You need to have guidelines to travel the journey. And the first guideline is that you are here to serve. And that's what makes your journey so rich and so powerful. If every person knew that, we would be, of course, in a different type of world. What happens, however, is, as I've discussed many times in this class, is that God made it more difficult for us by shrouding the fact that we can convince ourselves that our lives are driven by simply our material successes and immediate needs. We live what's called myopic vision, where we only see the here and now. And we can forget that we're on a mission, and we can forget that there's a calling, we can even forget we're on a journey. From time to time, we may be reminded by different events in our lives. But we could suddenly get completely distracted and hypnotized and seduced by all kinds of sideshows, to the point that we completely forget we're on a mission. And that's where the so-called tragedy begins. Tragedy doesn't always mean a disaster in the physical sense. Tragedy means when a person loses sight of why they're here. Imagine you hired somebody, and you invested your whole life, all your resources, to your child or your friend or the person you hired should go on a mission, and then you look at them and you say, hey, they completely forgot about their mission, they went off, they got distracted, they're busy somewhere. It's one of the most painful things. You invested your whole existence, everything you have for that person to fulfill a mission, and they forgot they're on a mission. This is the story of most people's lives. We live in this material world. The material world, to use Kabbalistic terminology, is a deep tzimtzum, a deep shroud that conceals what is real and what isn't real. And we can completely seduced, completely distracted by the externals. The Shalah, the Holy Shalah writes, he uses the example, you often see the term used in Hasidic and Kabbalistic literature, the term klipa. If you hear the word klipa, klipot. The literal translation for the word klipa means a husk. A klipa is a shell. Like you say, a klipa of a nut has a nutshell. An egg has a shell. A potato even has a peel. These are all different levels of what's called klipot, coverings. Shells, husks. Now, when you usually read the word klipot in these texts, immediately people think it means evil, because klippa will always talk about that this comes from holiness and this comes from klippa. This comes from the negative. The question is, why then use the word klippa? Klippa just means a shell. It doesn't mean negative. A shell is a shell. So he gives a very simple but brilliant and profound explanation of this word klippa that's used in Kabbalistic texts. So he explains, what is the purpose of a shell? So a shell, a husk, is to protect the fruit within. Like the expression, klipa shemer lepri. The husk, the shell protects the fruit. So when you have fruits or nuts or other edible elements, what does the shell do? It protects it. It protects it from the elements, protects it from worms and from other toxins. So when you get it, you don't just have a fruit, you have a fruit that's covered up, and then you can peel, let's say, orange, take the peel off and you eat the fruit. Okay, so far so good. What happens, however, that you look at the fruit and you only see the peel and you don't realize there's a fruit inside. and you look at the peel, and you start worshiping the peel. And you start, your focus and consciousness is all about the peel. That's when problems exist. That's when we start judging a book by its cover, so to speak. Even though it's a cliche, never judge a book by its cover, but everybody does. That's why it's a $1 billion industry. Packaging, covers, and so on. So the peel becomes more important than what's inside, which is the case. They say in Madison Avenue, the cynics say, it doesn't matter what happened, it matters what people think happened. If you could put the right spin on a product, on an event, that's more important than the actual reality. If people think it's good, that's all you need, because they'll buy it. So we have many products that may not have any much value, but if you can convince people it has value, that's enough. That doesn't mean that there aren't products that actually do have value. But, like for example, Coca-Cola is the number one brand in the world. What value does it have for the human race? Besides, let's say now that they make so much money, so they give charity or they support different events and so on. But directly, the drink itself, very few people will say it has any value, real value. It has perceived value. What's the perceived value? That it makes you feel good, the fizz. It seems to go well with a lot of foods. And most importantly, they got our brains to think, Coke. Coke is beautiful. Coke is life, whatever it is. So, it's not an attack on Coca-Cola, it's really an attack on human perception. Anyone that's a real person sees through these things, but we see how much we're seduced by the external. So here's where the clipper becomes a problem. It's not a problem if you know this is a shell, a package, to cover and protect what's inside the package. Fine. But what happens if you start worshiping the package and you forget that there's a fruit inside? That's called distortion, and that distortion leads to many, many problems. Let's speak it on a human form. Let's say we start looking at each other as human beings and externals. I judge you only on what I see. You look good, I like you. You don't look good, I don't. Forget about your personality, what's going on inside. This is the world in which we live. We're a superficial world, where vanity and externals matter more than internals. Yes, we will be distracted. If you see someone beautiful walking down the street, it makes no difference what's going on inside. It will get your attention. Because we live in a superficial world where the shell is more important than the fruit. Now this doesn't mean the shell doesn't have value, but it has value as an outer protection of what's going on inside. As I've discussed many times, I'm not suggesting you should have beauty within and beauty without. But if you only focus on the package and you forget what's inside, then you basically, who of us would not be insulted if somebody talks to you and all they care about is what you look like. They don't care about what you feel, what you think, what your personality is like, and so on. So this is the Shalah's explanation of why the word klippa is used. Because klippa is not per se a bad thing, but because the world is created with an inner and an outer, and you begin to focus on the outer at the expense of the inner, that's when problems begin. So if we were all able to pierce the surface and see what's inside every given situation, we'd have a different reality. But we're not that way. We focus on what the here and now, instant gratification, the moment. Just think of how many errors, how many sins, how many mistakes we've made in life because we focused on the moment instead of the big picture. Where you have a situation that something seduces you, something gets your attention, something consumes you. And even while you're involved in it and about to get tempted by it, you say, this whole thing is superficial. It's not going to last. The pleasure I get from this will last as long as the experience. It'll be all over in a moment. And yet we get completely distracted, even while we know that long term may be a lot of bad consequences from it. That's what happens. There's something about this material world that has a hold on us, that the klippa suddenly controls us, and because it's covering up what's inside, and you can convince yourself that what you see right now is more important than what is within. This is essentially the beginning of someone getting lost in this world, where you're on a journey, and instead of focusing on your mission, and you focus on your destination, you focus on the distractions of the klippa, of the outer shells. So that's where the Torah begins and says, Adam ki yakriv mekem korban LaHashem, that when a person will bring from yourself, the first step is you have to be ready to offer yourself to service, to serve a higher cause. That's the opening of all life statements. Life is not about you. Life is about your cause. Life is about your mission. But now let's go back to the opening of the chapter in the book. The glaring omission of the word who is calling, Vayikra, this invisible call. Imagine someone saying, calling to Moses. It doesn't say he, it doesn't say she, it doesn't say God, it doesn't say anyone. Calling to Moses. Why is the name not there? So the Alter Rebbe has a fascinating explanation in the Likutei Torah. He says that the essence of everything really has no name. When you talk about the divine, and we'll soon talk about us, every name is already a description. A name has a description. A name is a handle with which we use to understand something. What happens when you're talking about something that is at the core essence of something? You don't have handles for it. I'll use an example from ourselves. I'll use this example many times. We all have a name. So your name captures all of you. But if someone were to say, tell me what lies at the core essence of your soul, nobody really can answer that question. There's really no words for it. So there's an expression in the Zohar that says that there's a level of the divine that Leib Sham is Leib Shum Eis, Leib Shum Kates, that has no name. There's a level, a dimension that has no name and no description, and it's not hinted to in any type of description. Now, of course, immediately bothers us because everything in this world we describe. We're always describing things. Someone will say to you, okay, tell me what your experience is like. So you describe it. I felt good. I felt bad. I felt cold, warm. Everything is about descriptive terms describing every given situation. So we think that descriptions are actually the best way to vividly capture anything that's going on in our lives. But you'll see in a moment that actually descriptions always compromise any true experience. The deepest experiences in life, you probably are actually ones you can't even describe. You can describe part of it, but the actual experience of it defies words. The deepest pleasures, the deepest experiences. Here we have our good Velvel, Meaningful Life Center colleague. Just became a grandfather this week. So ask him to describe what it feels like to become a grandfather. I remember when I became one. So you could describe, you feel good, you feel happy, you feel ecstatic, you know your child has had a baby. But there's something about it you can't describe, it's just an experience. We have our good friend Philip. Tomorrow evening, I'd like to dedicate the class to Lily and Pesach, who will be getting married tomorrow. So I remember when my daughter got married, no way to describe the feeling. I'm a writer, I'm a communicator, I can find words, and you can find words to express even the inexpressible, but it still does not come to the actual experience. So just think of any special moment in your life, when you first had a child, first time you fell in love, something that completely took you to another place, something that not you were in control, the experience controlled you, it lifted you to another place. Can you find words for it? To some extent you can find words, but only someone that went through what you're going through will look in your eyes and they don't even need words. Because real experiences actually don't have descriptions. So descriptions are a limited manner of expressing something profound. As a matter of fact, as I've stated many times here, and I think it's a very important point, and think about it, it's very counterintuitive, but the more words you have for something, usually the more superficial is the experience. That sounds a little strange, right? You'd think if it's a more real experience, you should have more words. Why is it but that's not the case. Let's spell it out. I never did any studies, but how many hours I spent on television, radio, and newspapers on the weather? And how many hours people talk about the weather? It's one of the most convenient things to talk about that have no consequences, you know? So how's the weather? Under the weather, over the weather, it's getting warmer, it's getting colder, there's been a cold winter, snow, blah, blah, blah. I remember once being in an elevator, going up like, it was a building maybe 40 floors. So, it's a little ride, it takes a few minutes. And it was a packed elevator and very quiet. So I said, no one's going to talk about the weather? And everybody burst out laughing. Because that's usually what, to break the sounds. Weather. Oh, the weather. Yeah. Did you take your umbrella? Did you not take your umbrella? It may rain or may not rain. I don't know. God created, I think, something so we can just talk without saying anything. So it's not so awkward, right? You just say, how's the weather? What do you think? It's getting warmer? Huh? Sports radio. You talk. I understand the thrill of watching sports, and even that it's also been commented on. Like they say, baseball is a game where 70,000 people who need to lose weight are watching 18 people who don't. You know? So the idea of a spectator sport is an interesting phenomenon. You know, you can see, I enjoy playing sports. But in America, you could find someone say, I enjoy sports. What does that mean? I watch. You know. Now, that's already given. I watch sports. That means I'm into sports. You know. I remember this because I remember when some of my cousins from Russia came out of Russia in the early 70s. So they didn't have, they had television there, but it was completely state controlled, and they didn't really have the ability to watch sports. So I remember when they came this, the first time they saw American television, first of all, it was intriguing to me. They didn't watch the shows. They were intrigued by the ads. They thought the shows were the ads, and the ads were the shows. That's number one. It's interesting. And the second thing was, they were fascinated. When people said, so you're into sports? What do you like? Soccer, basketball, and this? Yeah, I love soccer. So when do you play? I watch every whatever. You know, the idea of watching. Spectator. So forget about that, fine. But then there's the talk around the spectator. And then there's the talk even out of season about the trades. And then there's the talk of the minor leagues and the college leagues and the high school leagues and kindergarten league, because you never know who's going to be the next great, they're cultivating them in the, what do they call them, training camps, etc., etc. The whole, what do they call it in baseball? It's like the, yeah, the farm leagues, right? They're farms, like animals. They're breeding them, right? The farms. So, I'm not necessarily suggesting all this is somewhat destructive, but definitely a waste of major time. And talk and talk and talk. Next time, just go into a car, open up talk radio, and they talk. They talk and talk and talk and talk. Oscar Wilde said, that people talk more. Well, he says they read more and more about less and less. Talk more and more about less and less. So you could see superficial things. We can go on and talk forever. When the Weather Channel started, 24-hour weather, people thought it would fail. Who's interested in 24-hour weather? You want to get a weather report once, twice a day, and that's it. Why do you need to know 24 hours? Every 5 minutes you're going to check what the weather is going to be like. And lo and behold, it became a major successful station, because when you live in the world of superficiality, the weather, and people, and you see maps and pressure systems and winds and so on. Like, when's the last time it was important to you to know that the wind is northeast 15 miles an hour? If you're a boater and you're going to sail, it's important to know. But it gives people, I feel, my theory is that it gives people a sense of control over a world that's out of control. Like, I know how many miles an hour. It's going south, it's going north. I see the clouds, I see the map. I'm in control of it all. And at the end of the day, I'm sure meteorologists have credentials and so on. But at the end of the day, probably the easiest thing to figure out when the next snow is coming is call Cleveland or Pittsburgh and see is it snowing there. And if the winds are blowing this way, most likely it's going to soon snow here. I mean, that's a pretty easy prediction without even going through all the maps. But my point is, fine, listen, everybody gets high on whatever they get high on. And studies show that all the television stations know that they have to have maps and guys pointing at maps and giving you like a sense of the systems at work. So be it. The point is a lot of talk. At the end of the day, what difference does it make? At best, it makes a difference. Obviously, if you're traveling, you want to know, so you take an umbrella, a raincoat. I understand. But what big difference does it make in the big scheme of things? Almost nothing. No difference, Which is why maybe in the city of Chelm, the guy goes out one day with an umbrella, and his friend is with him. It starts raining, so he says to him, so why don't you open the umbrella? He says, because it's full of holes. So he says, so why'd you take it? He says, because I didn't think it was going to rain. This is a classic Chelm story. We take something, and then you have to figure out the logic. It's the weird logic of human brains. Okay. The point I'm making is a lot of talk. Now someone says to you, if I said in the elevator, how are you feeling today? So besides the prerequisite, nice, good, whatever, like they say, when someone asks you how you are, don't tell them about your indigestion. Because how are you is a greeting, not a question. It's a poem. Okay. It's a greeting. But let's say someone really sincerely says, how are you? What's going on inside your life? So you suddenly don't have so many words. I'm happy to talk about the weather. I'm happy to talk about sports. I could talk to you about 1,000 things. But don't ask me what's going on inside of me. That's and the reason is not because necessarily you have a lot to say and you just don't trust the person, or you're not interested in speaking about your own vulnerability or your own needs, etc. The fact is, we have less words. Even with someone we trust. It's not so, talking about yourself is not so easy. So even if you have someone you totally trust, you find very few words. Which again seems to be an oddity. Words are an expression of an experience. If you have an experience that's closer to your heart, why shouldn't you have more words than that's superficial and who really cares about the weather or the sports? The answer is an obvious one. Because words are containers. Containers, like all containers, are limited. A container can only contain that which fits into the container. Since words are limited containers, they can express superficial things. When something is more intense and is more intimate, right, then the container is too small. So that then just regular words don't express a deeper feeling. That's why we created the language called metaphor, poetry, songs, and so on. Because metaphor broadens the containers. The so-called mysterious nature of the metaphor. It's hints and it's what's the word I want to use? It's allusions with an A. Allow for expression of deeper feelings. As a kid, I remember we were going to school and we had to read poetry. No children like poetry. It's like we used to always say, why can't he just say it straight? Why does he got to say it in such a crooked way? Turn the words around. Why do you have to say the words backwards just to rhyme? Or not even to rhyme? You get older, you start to realize, well, a lot of people get older and they still don't realize what poetry is. They just make believe. Oh yeah, I love poetry. Really? Yeah. I love Shakespeare. I read it every time, all day. How many people read Shakespeare? Not so easy to read. You have to have a lot of time and patience. But if you do appreciate it, you realize that precisely because it's not like conventional prose and conventional words, it contains more depth, more nuances, more meaning. Then you go deeper. If you want to express a deeper feeling, as I said, a song, a cry, or just saying, oy vey. You walk in, oy vey. You walked in the positive way. Or you say things like, a cry, one cry. So as you go deeper into the soul, the less expression there is. Today they know, psychologically speaking, that when people, God forbid, suffer a real trauma, initially there's a level of shock, they can't even cry. And it's a whole thing. You see when no one should ever know of trauma, but trauma creates major shock creates major silence. They can't even cry. And good psychologists know how to help a person go through that stage and get to the stage that they can begin to cry, to express it. Why? Because the most intense experiences have no sound to them. So here's the counterintuitive rule. We live in a world, a superficial world, where everything is measured. Who's the wealthiest? The one with the most money. Who's the most powerful? The one with the most arms. Everything is measured by quantity. But in truth, when you look at real things, it's the exact opposite. The less you have, the more you have. As I just said, the deepest feelings inside of a person have the least amount of words. And the deeper you go, the less the expression. And this is a fact of life. As I said, weather, sports, superficial things you can talk about all day. Money, all day you can talk about it. And night as well. Someone says to you, tell me about your innermost feelings. What do you believe in? What do you aspire to? You don't have many words. And the answer is very simple. I'm using a Hasidic expression explaining it, using Kabbalistic terminology. The Arizal, the Zohar, talks about Eris and Kalim. Eris is energy, Kalim are containers. Everything in this world is made of energy and containers. Just to use a simple example. The letters on a page of a book, those are containers. The message they convey is the energy. Obviously, a cup of water, the cup is the container, the water is the energy. In our own human bodies, our faculties are made up of eris and kalim. Your physical eyes and ears are containers. For what? For the faculty called vision, or sound, hearing. God forbid, a corpse is a container without energy. You can have energy without a container. God forbid, let's say a person, for some reason there's a severing of nerves, or stroke. So their mind is functioning and they feel they can do everything, but it just doesn't. The keli is weakened. Or the connection between we call the eir and the keli is weakened. So life is about Eir and Keli. A healthy human being, using the formula of this language, the Eiris and Kelim are completely harmonious. Harmony. Seamless. The same thing as, let's say, you ever read a book and you're really consumed by the pages, you turn the pages, you don't even realize it's a book. You're like so immersed in the story. Why? Because the words and the ideas are so seamless you don't even tell anymore. You can't even tell that you're reading. This is when something is very smooth. Or sometimes when things are not smooth, you feel like a jolt. You feel something's out of sync. Harmonious experience is where Eir and Keli become so symmetrical and seamless you can't tell where the energy begins and where the energy ends and where the Keli begins. Communication is a song. When someone sings in tune, it has a harmony to it. There's a beauty to it. When someone sings out of tune, it's very grating on your nerves. Why? Because the Eir and Keli don't fit. As they say, what's worse than one person singing out of tune? Two people singing out of tune. Try it out, you'll see what I mean. 3 gets exponentially worse as it goes. So what you have is harmony is about Eir and Keli moving like they say, like smooth like a fiddle. That type of thing. So it's an excellent model for analyzing when you see, let's say, a marriage that's working or not working, or you look at friendships or parents and children or any type of relationships. When it's working, the Eiris and Kelim are very smooth. When it's not, you can identify. Sometimes it's the Keli, sometimes it's the Or, sometimes it's the energy that's not too intense for the containers, or the containers are too small or too great for the energies. It's a little digression, but it's an important point because it's an excellent way of analyzing many situations. Wherever you see harmony, you know that the energy in the container are working well together. When you don't, you know there's some dysfunctionality, some disconnect. So why am I mentioning this? Because let's go back to words and expression. When the deeper, more intense experiences in our lives, the energies are very intense and the containers are very small. So one example given for this is in Hasidic thought that talks about the human body. Look at the human body, an interesting phenomenon. Where are most of the faculties concentrated in the human body? In the head. The head, per capita, per square foot, or per square inch, has more going on than any other part of the body. You have the brain, of course. You have eyes, you have ears, you have smell, you have taste and mouth, speech. Everything all in the head. The head is the smallest part of the body. You work your way down the torso, the chest. So yes, we have the heart, we have the liver, we have the lungs, we have the gallbladder, we have the liver. We also have faculties, but none of them come close to the faculties that are in the brain, in the head, I should say. As a matter of fact, we know where's most heat released in the human body? From the head. Because the head is like the hard drive. Is the central nervous system. That's where most energy is being expended. In the legs, you have the least amount of faculties. And yet the legs are more than half the body. The torso is almost a little less than half. And the head is the smallest. So Hasidic teachings, they write, because where there's more air, there's less keli. Wherever there's more quality, there's less quantity. Because the intensity and power of the energy is so intense that it does not allow for room for much of container. So that explains why I said earlier that the deeper the feelings inside of a person, the less expression you have. The deeper you travel inward, ironically, the less words you'll have to express it. Which explains why God said to Moses a few chapters back, no person can see me and live. Because sight is limited. You want to see something that's real? Can you see love? Can you see your soul? Can you see truth? Everything that's real is not seeable. Not because the thing doesn't have ability to express itself, because eyes, like I said before, are limited containers. What can an eye see? An eye can see what the eye is made of. Physical eyes see physical objects. I've given the example from Sir Arthur Eddington. He was a physicist in the 20th century, in the mid-20th century. And they asked him, how do you come to these weird, bizarre conclusions in quantum mechanics? So quantum mechanics is the study of subatomic particles. It's a study of the world that is beneath the surface, that today allows for cell phones and for computers and for microchips to be able to store so much data in one chip that once would have taken blocks, if not cities, to store. How could you do that? It defies the rules of time and space. Communication itself defies the rules of time and space. You could sit here and watch a live event in Australia, or for that matter on the moon, exactly what's happening, a split second. Okay, farther away takes time for the transmission, but across the globe in a split second you see it. No one really can understand how that works. Something's going on, because what's happening? How did we transcend time and distinction between time and space? So the bottom line is quantum mechanics explains these ideas, and there are many bizarre conclusions. So they asked this physicist, Eddington, how could you come to such conclusions about a reality that no one has ever seen? Today we know that every physical entity in this world consists of elements. Elements. For example, you say the classic is water, H2O. You know what that is? H2O is 2 parts of hydrogen and 1 oxygen. 2 molecules of hydrogen and 1 molecule of oxygen is what constitutes water. Now, what do these elements help us do? They help us unite the world. That instead of seeing billions and trillions of different items, all these items are made of the same elements. And we have in the element table, we have the 108 or 110 elements today. The elements in turn are made of molecules. Okay, molecules in turn are made of atoms. Atoms in turn are shaped from are made of subatomic particles. Sometimes you hear quarks, protons, neutrons, electrons, etc., etc. The same thing in the human body. Today, you talk about the human organs. You have arms and legs, a brain, a heart, and so on. But what are they made of? Today we know they're all made of cells. And the cells in turn are made of chromosomes. And the chromosomes in turn are made of DNA. So you hear about, let's say, stem cell research. It's getting to the core of the cells. The DNA in all parts of your body are the same. It's only different combinations. So basically you're taking a lot of data, a lot of different diversity, and finding unifying forces that shape it all. So the subatomic particles exist in all of us are very similar. Why am I making the point? The point is so they asked them the question, how do you come to conclusions about things that are invisible? DNA, for example, no one has ever seen. It's impossible to see with the eye, and you can't see it even with a microscope. A cell can be seen. Chromosome, maybe. But subatomic particles are not, even an atom, we don't even know what an atom looks like. In school, they draw atoms like a cluster of grapes. That's just a working model. It's not because that's what it looks like. It's something to help us visualize it. So they asked him the famous question, how do you come to conclusions about things that no one has ever witnessed? So his answer, he gave the example of a fisherman who spread his net over the seas and then began gathering and collecting all types of fish and documenting the different species, the different colors, the different shapes, the different sizes. And then he came to a conclusion. There are no fish in the sea shorter than a half-inch long. Okay, it's an interesting conclusion from a scientist. And he was about to announce this to the wizards of the world. When, what do they say, like the emperor with no clothes? A child came over to him and said to him, his child, and said, listen, Daddy, one small little problem. Look at the net you use to collect these fish. The net has spaces, the ropes are spaced a half-inch. So therefore, all the fish that were shorter than a half-inch long fell back into the water. So yes, it's a very brilliant conclusion to say that there are no fish in the sea with shorter than a half-inch long, except you have to make one qualification. That if you use a net with half-inch spaces, you're not going to never catch fish that are shorter than a half-inch long. But you don't need a scientist for that. That's basic logic. What Eddington's point was, Arthur Eddington's point was that it's all about the tools. To say that you're going to use certain tools to experience certain things, you have to know the tools. You can knock in a nail with a hammer. You can't knock in a message into someone's head with a hammer. Because it's a different type of experience. So if you want to experience things that are not visible to the eye or to a microscope, you have to use different tools. So what tools do we use to reach a place that does not have the normal expression through an experience of sensory experience through sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell? There are other tools. There are tools of, you can have a sense of something, you can feel something, not physically feel it. Someone can walk into this room right now, gives off a bad vibe, and you feel it. You can't prove it with the senses, because you can't see it or hear it or taste, touch, or smell it, but you sense something. And there are other tools that we have, many tools that are far more sophisticated than sensory tools. And I don't just mean intuition. It's real tools. So how do these scientists come to understand and create rules and laws around subatomic particles that nobody's ever been able to see, touch, or any other way experience? And not only do they create rules, all technology today wouldn't exist if it were not for this. A few years ago, there was a best-selling book that said, the most reliable machine on earth is built on the most unpredictable reality. The computer, the most reliable machine on earth, it's a number cruncher. A calculator will always give you the same results if you put in the same numbers. Always. And you rely on it? Oh, absolutely. You may have human error, but without human error, always the same results. And the whole computer is built on the microchip, which is based on Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. The most uncertain thing in existence gives us the most certain results. The whole book just explained this paradox. So the point is that when you go to the deepest parts of human experience and reality, you have the least amount of words and least amount of expression. I'll give another example for this. Our own selves. Someone asks you, what does it feel like to be healthy? If you could describe it, you probably need a doctor. Because health is not supposed to feel like anything. Someone say, what does it feel like to breathe? It's not supposed to feel like anything. It's just smooth. It's seamless. If you say it feels like something, that sensation usually is a sign there's some problem. If I were to ask you now, for example, and you don't know yet what I'm going to ask, but now I'll ask it, what's your left leg doing? A second before I asked that question, your left leg was alive. It was there, but you wouldn't think about it. So by thinking about it, does it make your left leg more real? The sensation of being, existing. Someone say, what does it feel like to exist? So you can describe what it feels like to have a hampered or impeded existence. I feel in a bad mood. I feel my heart is beating quickly. I feel like I have a pain in my arm. All those feelings are describing an aberration, an anomaly. Someone asks you, what does it feel like to exist? It has no feeling. I just am. Explain to me, what does it mean I am? Explain that sentence. I am. I am from my head to my toe, my right foot, my left foot. The fact that I think about it, now I feel my consciousness is my foot is doing this, now it's resting on the ground. Or I'm pressing at it, or whatever. That's already a consciousness. So to put it in more, let's call it more scientific terms, the consciousness of something is always a compromise of the thing itself. Now I know that sounds very counterintuitive, because you'd say, what do you mean? Consciousness and awareness is one of the biggest gifts of life. I'm conscious and aware of something. Yeah, but think about that again. As soon as you're conscious and aware, it means you're outside of the experience. Because when you're experiencing it, you are it. You're not experiencing it, you are it. If a fish were to tell you, I feel wet, there's a problem. A fish, or water were to tell you, let's go even deeper, water. Tell you, I feel wet, water is wetness. That's why there's an expression when Mashiach comes, it says, the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. What's the comparison? Because knowledge, when it consumes you, it's not like I'm gaining knowledge, now I don't know, now I feel I know something. That's a more superficial experience of knowledge. True knowledge is it becomes so much one with you that it's like the waters cover the sea. It's like wet water and wetness. You become one with it. It's not like I am here, my knowledge is here. You are the knowledge, and the knowledge is you. Using my Maimonidean expression, hu hamada, hu yedea, hu yedua. When you're really consumed with your mind in something, you're not feeling, I'm here, here's the idea, here's the thought. That all becomes so encompassed with one another that it's as you, the thought, the knowledge, the knower, and what is known are all become one. As I mentioned before, when you're completely immersed in a book, and you don't even realize what time it is, and it's only a book, but the book can transport you to another time and place, and as soon as you become conscious, you lose the magic. A song. You put on a headset, you drown everything out, and you just allow yourself to be submerged in the music. What's the experience like? It's very hard to describe it because you become one with the experience. So even though consciousness and awareness sounds like a very great thing, you're aware, this one's not aware, the truth is, there's none awareness, there's a fool that's not aware, not conscious about things. There's shaita ein margish. A fool does not sense things. He's not aware, he's not sensitive to things. We're not talking about that's beneath consciousness. Then there's consciousness, and then there's above consciousness. Consciousness means there's a subject and an object. I'm aware that you're in the room. But when there's real love, I'm not aware that you're in the room. You and I become one. You join as one. It's not I and you. There's no I and thou. There becomes the subject and the object become completely immersed. Now everybody has examples for this in their lives. Sometimes you stay up at night, you're involved in a very serious project that really you're passionate about, excited about, and then you suddenly realize hours passed. You don't even realize you were hungry, you were tired. As soon as you start feeling tired, hungry, you already lost the moment. Sometimes they call it being in the zone. I can tell you as a writer, you work your whole life to be in that zone. So you could be sitting and writing and feeling it and conscious and all the blocks. But then when you get into the zone, it's like everything melts away and it just starts flowing through you. It's like a consciousness. You hear it from athletes and others. It takes training, a lot of conditioning. But when you get to the zone, what happens is it's just you become like a channel of an experience. Now, if you've been blessed to experience this, you know exactly what I mean. If you haven't, it's not describable. Like I said before, go describe the moment that you fell in love. Go describe the moment a child is born. The magic of a moment that is beyond words. You could describe it to some extent, but you can't describe the pure experience. It's just beyond words and description. So the interesting irony here is that the deepest experience have no words. So you'll say, well, so then how do we talk about it? Yeah, maybe you don't. You can talk about it the way I'm talking now, through what's called Yediyas Hashlila, by extrapolation, by saying it's not this, it's not that, it's not that, and we all get it. Now, why are you understanding what I'm saying? I hope you are at least. Is because you've had experiences like this. It resonates because you know what it feels like to be transported to another time and place through a song or through some enchanting experience. Now all this is meant to explain the glaring omission in the opening verse of the third book of the Torah. When you open it up, there seems to be missing, there's clearly missing a word. It says, Vayikra el Moshe, which in English translates, called to Moses. And called to Moses. Can you say in English, called to Moses? If you saw that, it'd be a clear typo. Who called? It doesn't say he called. Who called? God called. Wherever you find the Torah, you say, Vayikra Hashem el Moshe. And God called to Moses. Why is it missing that word? So the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Torah, the Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi says, because this is talking about not God as he expresses himself. This is talking about the essence of the divine that's beyond expression, therefore there's no word. So the word, any word would limit the experience. So basically, as we enter this third book, as I explained at length earlier, that the first two books of Chumash, the first book lays out the foundations of the divine blueprint called the Torah. The story of Adam and Eve, the story of the patriarchs, and it concludes with the death of Jacob and his sons. So it lays out, as they say, the foundational elements of the blueprint of life. The second book is the story of life itself. First of all, the exile and the bondage of living in Mitzrayim, which is constraints. Then the exodus from Egypt, finding transcendence and freedom. The giving of the Torah, the building of the temple. The purpose of life, to transform this material world into a divine home, into a temple. That's how book 2 ends. And book 3 begins mostly focused not on the chronological narrative, but on the laws. Vayikra is all about laws. I mean, it has some narrative, but mostly it all happens in one day, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Right after the temple was erected, which was around a year after they left Egypt, 10 months after they receive the Torah, 11 months, they are listening to these laws where God gives them the guidelines that before you begin the journey of life, and the journey will be the next final 2 books. Bamidbar, Dvarim Bamidbar talks all about the journey till they get to the promised land. And Dvarim, the last book, is Moses reviewing the whole story. So before we start the full real journey in the most difficult part of life, God lays out the rules, the guidelines. And as I said, Adam Kiyakriv Mikem. The first rule is you're here on a mission. You didn't come to this world to make money, to eat, to indulge yourself. You came here, you were sent here on a mission. And the most important question will always be asked to you, now and forever. Did you fulfill your purpose, your mission in this world? So Adam Kiyakriv Mikem Karban Hashem, that from you, it doesn't say Adam Mikem Kiyakriv. Not when a person will, that you yourself bring yourself as an offering, serving a higher purpose. The word carbon means from the word closeness, to get closer to. Closer to what? To your calling. To offer yourself. Not just to serve yourself, to serve a higher cause. So as this opens up, this 3rd book, which describes the outline of the journey, of the purpose of the journey, God does not speak in garments, He does not speak in conscious terms, He speaks from the essence. Vayikra al Moshe doesn't say even God's name. Like the Zohar says, that Anochi, it's a level that is beyond names. So when you say someone has a name already is a description. For example, let's say it takes God's names. We have God has 70 names. God has 7 holy names. Yud Kei Vav Kei. It has a meaning. It means Haya Haya V'yeh, which means past, present, and future all in one. It means Mahava, as a creator. It has other meanings. Elokim means justice, din, discipline. Kael is chesed. Tzvokis is God as warrior. Every one of the names has meaning and significance as meaning. As the Medrash says, according to God's actions, that's how you call Him. When He's in the mode of giving and compassion, you call Him Kael. When He's in the mode of judgment or discipline, you call Him Elokim. When He's in the mode of compassion, you call Him Havaya, etc. Like it says, when we blow shofar Rosh Hashanah, God goes from the throne of judgment to the throne of compassion. So different names based on different manifestations. Like someone would say to you, you're an intelligent person. That's how you manifest in intelligence. You're an emotional person. That's how you manifest in emotions. You're a lawyer. That's how you manifest in that in your work. Whatever it is that we do. But who are you? Most people, you ask them, who are you? They give you their business card. But business card is at best partial manifestation of what you do. It's what you do. It's not who you are. Who you are, it's a very difficult question to answer. Who am I? Who am I in my entirety? I don't even know. Do we know of all that makes us tick? So we know about our manifestations. We know I can be a father, I can be a mother, a husband, a wife, a co-worker, a boss, an employee, you have clients, relationships. That's how you are manifest in an expressive way. But what are you at your core? There's no name for that. The same thing is with the divine. How God manifests in existence in many ways. He can be the creator, He can be the artist, He can be the judge, He can be a father, He can be the master. All the different names, the shepherd. We have all kinds of names. These are manifestations. You want to know what is God like on God's terms? Vayikra Moshe, there's no word used. Called to Moses. It's like saying the essence called, but the word essence doesn't have a name. And that's why the Vayikra also has a small aleph, as I mentioned. A few places in the Torah scroll, you'll find some letters are smaller and some are larger. Here, the aleph in Vayikra, the last letter, is a aleph ze'era, which means a small aleph, representing what? How do we receive the essence of the divine? By being diminished. As I said before, the more energy, the less container. You want to experience the divine and essence? The only way to enter is with bittul, is being yourself in the most humble type of fashion, humility. Because if you come in with all your strength and power, what are you going to get? You'll get things on your terms. You want God on God's terms, you have to strip yourself. You have to suspend your own strengths. To use the classic Baal Shem Tov Torah where he says, Tfilu la'ani, and pray like a pauper. And then he continues, L'fnei Hashem eshpech sichi. that before God I pour out my I pour out my soul. So he says the following, that two people were invited. He says, why pray like a pauper? Why pray like a pauper? So he gives the analogy, you're standing before God, be like a prosperous person. Why like a pauper? So this is the Baal Shem Tov's analogy. Two people were invited to see a king, great king. A once in a life experience. One of them is an educated, prosperous, literate aristocrat. And the other is illiterate, ignorant pauper. First comes the educated one, the sophisticated one. He comes into the palace. He's never seen a palace like this. But because he's an aristocrat himself and is educated, he appreciates all of it. He gets so enamored with the architecture, with the art, with the libraries, with every aspect of this grand palace, that he misses his appointment with the king. You know, he got so enamored, so busy with it, he finally looks at his watch, missed the appointment. Then comes the pauper, illiterate, uneducated, doesn't appreciate any of this. So he walks right through the palace as if it's nothing. For him, it's meaningless. He goes right into the king's chamber, spends all the time there, asks for everything, including the wisdom to appreciate all the majesty of the king. That's the Baal Shem Tov's analogy. He says, when you stand before God, the king, suspend all your sophistication and your literacy, because those are beautiful, they're great, but you can only get what you can get with that. You'll only get, you like they say, you grow by your sword, you rise by the sword, and you die by the sword. If you come with your tools, you'll get as much as your tools can provide. Brilliance has its limits. There's a finite space. So you'll get as much as you can appreciate. When you suspend everything, then you become an absorber to absorb things that are beyond your capacity. That's the difference. So the aristocrat, the educated one, his own education allowed him to appreciate what he could appreciate, but he missed the essence. He missed the core. Because he was distracted, as they say, giluyim, the revelations, the sheer majesty of it all blinded him. Whereas the person who doesn't appreciate it doesn't see it in the first place. So he goes right to the center, to the core of it all, the beginning of it all. This is one of the reasons, for example, why in Judaism, even though there's talk in the Zohar about astrology, about the stars, and even about what do they call it? Palmology? Reading palms? Palmistry. Palmology, okay. I knew it was logy or tree, one of the things. Palmistry. Like chemistry or archaeology. Why some logies, I guess, logic. Okay. Anyway. And there's all kinds of talk about even reading faces and so on. And why don't we find the mainstream Judaism talk about, why are we not consumed with the stars and with horoscopes and so on? Because it's a distraction from the core. It's like stopping at the stations and forgetting the destination. Like that wise guy, he goes into the palace and he gets so enamored with God's majesty, he forgets God. Yes, there's much majesty, there's much beauty in the stars and the cosmos, and you can study them forever. But you're studying those are God's footprints, those are God's fingertips. It's like studying the palette of the artist and forgetting there's an artist. So the artist, yes, has a whole arsenal of great tools, and they're very beautiful and they can be very seductive and distracting, but they're not the artist. I think I mentioned this here a number of times. Pavarotti, do you say Olav Shalom on him? Once did a rendition of "The Lord is My Shepherd," Psalm 23, and he did a beautiful rendition. He had a standing ovation. When he finished, everybody sat down. One old Jew remained standing, and the old Jew did his rendition of Tehillim Chav Gimel, David Hashem Roi. Hashem Roi, God, Lord is my shepherd. And when he finished, the whole place was crying, weeping. So Pavarotti went over to the Jew and said to him, why when I did it, they all gave me a standing ovation? And when you did it, they all were crying. So he answered very simple. He says, you may know the psalm, but I know the shepherd. So Pavarotti knows the psalm, he knows the song. but I know the one who composed the song. I know the one the song is about. It's a very big different story. Like someone will tell you a story, a beautiful story, about your father. You say, it's a great story, but I knew my father. It's a whole different reality. So, when you want to get to God's essence, no name, no description can take you there. But that itself requires preparation, which is why you could ask the question, if that's the case, why don't we have everywhere the Torah should always talk about the core divine? Because we are human beings, and we need tools, we need handles, we need something to hold on to. But now, after the revelations that came to Adam and Eve, and then to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, where we know that, as we learned in the last book, that God says, I revealed myself, Keil Shaddai, but Shmi Havaya, I did not reveal Havaya to you. So you see in the Torah progression. First, God creates the world, Bereshis Bara Elokim. The first verse in the Torah. What name is used? Elokim. Why Elokim? Why doesn't it say Bereshis Bara Hashem? The Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton, the holiest name. So Rashi explains why. God wanted to create the world with Midas Hadin. That's Brit Elokim. He saw that the world would not tolerate that, so he introduced later the compassion. The question is, why did he want to create it with discipline? So here you need Kabbalah Chassidus that explain, because for existence, to have an independent identity, an independent consciousness, God has to conceal his own consciousness. If the divine presence would be omnipresent, like the Arizal says, Eir Ein Sof filled all the expanse of existence, or potential existence. And you need a tzimtzum arishan, a black hole, a complete concealment. Think of it like a teacher with infinite brilliance. If he continues to articulate his brilliance, and his presence consumes everything, no student and a beginner would never be able to begin. You have to first conceal all that presence and consciousness. Then, like the Arizal continues, a narrow thread and ray of light enters. That's like the stream of consciousness that the teacher begins to spoon feed. Let's teach Aleph, Kametz Aleph A, Kametz Beis Ba, ABC. When a child is learning ABC, they have a clue what that ABC is going to teach them one day. You know, think of children. You see, they do A, B, C, D. One day, those letters become words, and those words become sentences, and sentences become paragraphs, paragraphs become chapters, chapters become volumes, and volumes become books. All of knowledge, all of those few letters, 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, all in letters. Those letters are like a very narrow stream of consciousness, but they begin to reveal that infinite potential. So you need a tzimtzum. That's Elokim. Bereshis bara Elokim. You want to create existence? An existence that has consciousness like ours, where we sense we exist on our own. That requires Elokim. So that's the first stage. Now you'll see 26 times, Elokim is mentioned 26 times, I believe, before Hashem is introduced. At the end of creation, it says, B'yem haseis Hashem Elokim es hashmayim v'sa'aretz. The day that God, Elokim and Hashem, because now God is introducing a higher name, the name of compassion. So Elokim, you can say, is the tzimtzum. Havaya is the kav, the narrow stream of light that begins to bring energy and light into the existence. And this will become a slow progression, literally like a child going through kindergarten to bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah. Then come the patriarchs, and God reveals himself, B'Keil Shaddai. Revelations are beginning to take place. And then, right in Egypt, in the darkest moments, God says to Moses, in the second chapter of Exodus, Vayikra, that I revealed myself to Keil Shaddai, to the patriarchs. V'shmi Havaya lo nadaiti lehem. I did not reveal them the real Havaya. Even though commentaries and everyone discusses, he did mention Yud Kei Vav Kei also in Bereshis. So it says it's a lower Havaya de la Tata. But Havaya de la Eila, the higher Havaya, I reveal now to you in the throes of Egypt. And by Matan Torah we read, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. A new name is introduced, Anoichi. A little earlier there's Eya She'eya. So God is now starting to reveal more of the core. And now, Vayikra, after the temple was set up, and they're beginning to serve in the temple, and they've brought the divine back to earth, the highest of all dimensions is revealed. the one that has no name. Vayikra el Moshe. Call to Moses. There's no he, there's no God. It's the essence itself calling. And how are you a container to it? Through being a pauper, a small aleph. If you come as a large aleph or a medium aleph, then you're a whole entity. Diminish yourself, and then you're open to everything. A full cup cannot be filled. An empty cup can be filled. This doesn't mean, this is not advocating illiteracy or being lacking things. It's advocating humility. Humility doesn't mean you don't have anything. Humility means you don't feel that you're worthy. Humility means not low self-esteem. Humility means that you have all the strengths, but you realize these strengths are not mine, they were given to me. And had someone else been given these strengths, they would have done better than I. It's emptying yourself. Humility is not taking yourself so seriously. I don't know if you've ever heard that translation. Not taking yourself so seriously. There's something greater than you are. A small aleph opens you up to the etzem, the atzmus, the core essence itself that's beyond name. And this is the beginning of the journey. And every morning, we say, Moda ani lefanecha. Interestingly, there's no name for God there either. What do we say? Moda ani lefanecha melech v'kayim shachzate b'nishmasi b'chem l'rabba munasecha. We don't mention any God's name. We say, Melech Chai v'Kayim, the living and eternal King. So the technical reason is because before you wash your hands, you don't say the name of God. But there's a deeper reason, because as soon as you wake up, you have the core essence of the divine that's not yet manifest in any name. So when you acknowledge in the morning, saying, thank you for giving me back my soul, you're basically speaking to the essence of the divine, who's given you, imbued in you, instilled in you a mission for life. An indispensable mission, saying, I'm creating you, I'm giving you a new day, a fresh day, with new energy, with new time, with a renewed contract. That's coming from the core itself. And you're acknowledging the core divine that's giving your core soul power. Then, a little later, a few lines later, we say in the prayer, Neshama shenasatabi, the soul you've given me, tahorahi. Now you're starting to describe it. The soul is pure. Ata v'ras, you've created it. Ata yitzarta, you've shaped it. Ata nefachtabi, you've imbued it in me. You've blown it into me, like we say, Vayipach ba'apav. God breathed the breath of the soul into Adam. And v'ata meshamer b'kibri, and you protected within me. All these levels. So Chassidus explains, Tahara is Atzilus, Barasa is Bria, Yitzarta is Yitzira, and Nefachta is Asiya. And that's where God protects. V'ata, the essence, protects the soul as it is down here below on earth. So those are already the manifestations of your soul, as it's either pure, created, shaped, and so on. But the core essence is the Modani. There's no names. It's just you and God, without names. The core, the essence, which doesn't have words. We have no way to describe it. As I said, it's how you are without any manifestation or expression. Now, the beauty of this is, you may say it sounds like esoteric, abstract. Not really. It's telling us that we have a part of ourselves that everybody, all of us knows that there's a part of you that is not expressible, that doesn't have words, and yet is the core of who you are. Many of us think that part of us can never be shared with anyone else. You know, it's that little lonely part that only you know. And sometimes you don't even know it. But the purpose of existence, just as it is with God, is not that God remain an elusive, no-name God, is that the no-name becomes expressed in names. The ultimate goal is to express the inexpressible. So to be able to find people that you love, and people that you share life with, kindred spirits, is to be able to connect on a core essential level, and then express it in words. So you may know that the soul, we know, has 5 names, the Medrash says. Chamisha Shemas Nikra, 5 names the soul is called. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida. The 5 dimensions, as I've discussed many times, refer to 5 dimensions of our lives. Going from the bottom up. Nefesh is biological life, that you breathe. The definition of biological life. Ruach is emotional life. Neshama is intellectual life. Chaya is transcendent life. And Yechida, as its name implies, is oneness. On Yom Kippur, we say 5 prayers because we reach all 5 dimensions. Shabbos and holidays, we say 4 prayers because we reach 4 of the 5. And every day we say 3 prayers because we reach the first 3. So Yechida remains the core, but it says in some places, it says 5 names she is called, which implies that the soul is even beyond the 5 names. Even Yechida is a name. Even though Yechida is Yechida liyachdach, it's as unified as it gets, but it's a name. What is the soul like beyond that 5th dimension? No name. It has no name. Just like Vayikra, Moshe, God has no name. So there's a dimension of us that is beyond any name. And then the goal is to manifest that into the 5 levels. So we have here, in essence, the whole story of our lives, where the purpose of life is not to live on a superficial level, not to even live on a biological level, emotional, intellectual, transcendent, yechida. It's to bring the deepest part of who you are and express it in your life. Now tell me if there's nothing more rich, more empowering and more validating than that. To know that your essence can be revealed in this world. The question is how? It's a superficial world. It values all kinds of externals, money, pettiness. The answer is that's the purpose of existence. Because the core essence desired a home in this world, which means that if you want to express the deepest essence of everything, you have to infuse your work and your superficial life with the deepest experiences. What does that mean? That it's not compartmentalizing and say, you know what, I give my soul to God on Yom Kippur or on Shabbos or on holidays. While you're at work, while you're immersed in the world of weather and sports and all the superficial things I spoke about, Coca-Cola and all that, when you use those experiences toward a divine end, you're infusing the superficial, the outer dimensions with the core. Which simply means, like I've talked about many times in the Baal Shem Tov's words, there are sparks everywhere. Not just in synagogue, not just in Jerusalem, not just on Yom Kippur, not just in your home, in the street, at your work, wherever you go, there are sparks waiting for you to redeem them. So when you use your work for a noble end, when you give charity, when you use your skills and talents towards something that's not just self-oriented, but for something greater, what you're doing is taking a superficial reality and turning it into something that is eternal. That's the greatest experience of all. Because you see, in some philosophies and schools of thought, especially Far Eastern, they talk about going into the essence of the divine, or whatever they call it, that has no name. But they don't talk about bringing it back to this earth. They talk about leaving the physical behind and experiencing the light. Judaism says that you can achieve more through an act in this world than through the greatest meditation. So when you in your simple mundane day acknowledge, not just acknowledge, but elevate your specific details into something that has divine purpose, that is the expression of the essence of the divine that's beyond name into your real reality. And that's why the whole essence of what sacrifices and karbonos are, which is the entire theme of this book. It's not just meditation. You could say, you know what? Why do we have to bring an animal sacrifice? Why bring an animal? Why not just sit in the temple, meditate on spiritual ideas, meditate about your animal soul, and offer your animal soul to God in a very spiritual sense. No blood, no mess. Because it's about elevating this material world. It's not enough to have a meditation. It's not enough to be a Jew at heart. It's taking the physicality of this world and draining it of its passion, selfish and self-indulgent passion, which is blood and fat indulgence, and directing it carbon from the word kiruv to some higher purpose. So it's not just enough to meditate on it. It's actually taking your animal soul. What is your animal? Your animal is indulging in whatever it is that you have interest in, whether it's food, whether it's sexuality, whether it's other distractions, and channeling it to a higher end. That's the goal. Not to ignore it. We're not talking about asceticism. Not to indulge, but to transform, to relieve the tension between matter and spirit by elevating, by spiritualizing the material. That's the ultimate goal. And that's what reveals the core of the essence in existence. In higher spiritual worlds, you can have spiritual experiences, but you can't have the divine essence. The divine essence that's beyond expression is experienced in a universe like ours, where there's also beyond expression, where you take something that is completely physical and material and turn it into something that's spiritual. That releases the most powerful divine energies in existence. So the goal ultimately is to take that essential level and manifest it in revealed levels. Like I said, the pauper goes to the king and he experiences the core, but then you come back and you experience it in wisdom, in nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida as well. So it all becomes one big fusion from the innermost essence of who we are to our outermost expression. So when a parent, for example, hugs a child, who's hugging the child? Is it just a superficial hug? No. It's coming from the core deepest essence, but it's expressed in a very physical way in a human child of flesh and blood. So you see that you can join together the highest and the most material. That's the purpose of it all. So when we are able to take this material world and turn it into like a divine channel, we turn it into a channel for divine energy, that's where we achieve that higher purpose. Okay. So on a concluding note, I want to dedicate again the class to to Lily and Pesach, who are getting married tomorrow. Also to Velvel becoming a grandfather. And going back to a takeaway message, the bottom line is that we have the power in our lives. No matter what goes on in our lives, we can elevate even the most mundane, superficial things into becoming eternal. And everybody always searches for excuse me, for immortality. We look for the fountain of youth. Well, immortality is right in our hands. When you take a small, simple act and you turn it into something that has a higher purpose, not your own, you take something mortal and you turn it into immortal. Finite into the infinite. That you can hold infinity in the palm of your hand and actually transform both existence and reach into the deepest core of things. So where's Vayikra Moshe? Where do you find the essence of the divine? In a simple offering. When you offer yourself to serve. You're not serving yourself, you serve a higher cause. That changes existence. Because you see, the human being by nature, at least ostensibly, is driven to serve himself or herself. The arrow is facing inward. Me, 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 me. That's what we have. Give me more, give me more, give me more. Because you want to fortify your own existence. And especially if you're insecure, you need more and more and it doesn't satisfy. Oyev kesef le'yizba kesef. You're never satisfied. The more you have, the more hungrier you get. You turn that arrow around, and instead of me, it's about giving, give. And you learn to understand that you can illuminate, and you have more to give than to take. That besides giving us a element of self-respect and dignity, it transforms existence. Because an existence like ours is a selfish one. You've turned a selfish material world into a giving world. You turned a world that drains and consumes. You've turned consumers into transmitters. You turned takers into givers. You turned a world that is constantly absorbing like a parasite and trying to survive. You turned it into a menorah that illuminates everything that it touches, that warms and illuminates everything. And this is all captured in what a carbon is. You take from the animal, the selfish beast, and you turn it into something that's an offering that, as I said, illuminates and warms everything around you. So may you all be walking offerings like that. However you meet and wherever you go, you change that person or you change that space into a space that becomes warmer and brighter after you've left there. That's a nice blessing to tell people, that wherever you go and whoever you meet should forever feel change for the positive, that you brought more light and you brought more warmth to that experience. So when you come back to years later and someone says to you, that after you left, things were never the same again, in a positive way. We also know that it could also be the other way around. Things are never the same in a destructive way. That's not what I'm talking about. So I bless everyone with that blessing. May everyone have a great week. And until next Wednesday, I bid you a very warm, illuminating, and giving week. Thank you. Very nice. Thank you.